Hello everyone. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share new Wendigo horror stories. First story, Wendigo Encounter. Hi, so this is my first post on Reddit. I just wanted to share this story and see if something like this has ever happened to anyone else. Just to start off with some backstory. My group of friends had started making a nasty habit of joking about the Wendigo. My friend Stacy and me didn't for a while, just due to the fact we believed in the supernatural. But after a few months it grew on us, and not knowing that the Wendigo can actually be triggered by such things, we joined in. Biggest mistake ever. I had just moved into the country, and we enjoyed making trips into town to have a few drinks, which is about a 30-minute walk from my place to town. At night, the first 10 minutes after leaving the bridge that leads out of town is pitch darkness with no streetlights. After that, streetlights are very sparsely places, which can cause for a very creepy walk back without anything happening. So with that all in place, let's continue. Stacy and I begin our night, walking into town, get some beers, and have some fun. Shortly into the night, something slightly strange happens. We receive a phone call from her little sister at home, crying and scared because she saw someone sitting on my friend Stacy's bed. She calms her sister down and asks her cousin to check her room for her sister at home. Everything is fine. No one's in the room. Also, ghosts and weird things happening at her house were very common, so a sighting like this was strangely regular. We continue our night. Into the night, we meet a guy who seems pretty cool. He's riding a bike and tells us he's pretty drunk or something. We decide to hang with him for a bit, wanting to meet people in town. A ways into our hangout, we are sitting on a park bench and the guy is laying on the ground in front of us. Suddenly, my friend stands up and says it's time for us to go. I shrug and agree, and we get going. After getting away from him, she tells me how the guy bit her ankle the day after she had teeth bruises on her ankle. Kind of flustered the guy would do that, we continue our walk out of town. Finally, we pass the bridge, which is our last source of light for the next 10 minutes. We turn on our phone flashlights, and we turn on some music, trying to ease the spooky feeling of being in pitch darkness in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, we hear a voice beside us. We both jump. It's the same guy on his bike. He asks us if he can follow us until we reach the fork in the road. We need to go left, and he needs to go right. Still slightly creeped out, but almost at the streetlights and the fork in the road, we agree. Regardless, he had to go that way, and so did we. After a bit of walking, we finally reach the fork in the road and the first streetlight. We sigh with relief, hoping he would leave. But he turns down our way instead of going the way he needs to go. Now at this point, we are thoroughly creeped out. We try to ignore it and keep walking, holding our breaths, wanting to reach the next street light, which is some ways away. Finally, after what felt like forever, we reach the next street light, which is also for some reason a small graveyard. I hate my area. Once we reach the street light, the guy stops dead in his tracks and doesn't move any further past it. As we turn around, the guy looks like he has suddenly passed out on his bike, his head down and shoulders slumped. I was about to say something to him, but my friend stopped me and said we really needed to leave him. I agreed, not wanting to be around him much longer either. After a few seconds, I take a peek over my shoulder. He's gone, vanished. The worst part is, even if he had turned around and started pedaling as fast as he could, we still would have been able to see him some ways down the road. I panicked, but also slightly relieved he wasn't there anymore. We continue walking, trying to pretend we aren't creeped out, walking quickly from streetlight to streetlight. Finally, we reach my driveway. My driveway is a long road of darkness. We hadn't put any lights in yet to try and brighten it. We began to walk slowly, holding our breath. Some weird feeling of dread coming over me the closer and closer we got to my house, and the further into the driveway we entered. I don't know what came over us, but the sudden feeling of you need to run, and you need to run fast, came over us at the same time. We took of bolting at the exact same time without having to say a word to each other. We got to my front door. I unlocked it quicker than I ever have before. We get inside. Just as I'm about to close the door, this hellish scream or growl, whatever the sound is, come out of nowhere. I could hear it getting close to the door and steps. I slammed the door closed and locked it and dropping to the ground in fear. We both sat there holding our breaths, scared to even breathe. Fast forward a couple weeks, me and my Stacy had forgotten about what happened. Suddenly it came up in convo, and we tried to find the sound we heard. Nothing worked. We looked up every possible animal, even animals that weren't likely. We spent an hour on this, until we decided to look up the sound of a Wendigo. It was the only sound that fit perfectly. We don't joke or talk about it now. I hate to. Even writing this post made me feel scared to bring it up. Once again, this is my first post ever, so be gentle on me. Shocked. I just really curious to hear if anyone had something like that happen to them. I also posted the link below of the sound we heard. The sound is on the very first clip. Also, I apologize for the length of this. Second story. I found a fair in the woods. The story I'm about to tell happened last year while I was a camp counselor. I had just turned 21, which meant it was my final year. The thing I found in the woods was the most terrifying thing I have ever faced. I keep replaying the events over and over in my head to make sense of them, and for that purpose, the following recollection of events is told in present tense. I wrote it that way to help me feel like I'm back there, not because I enjoyed it, but because I hope to someday solve the mystery. Let's begin, shall we? I've been tossing and turning for an hour. I haven't gotten a wink of sleep yet. My chronic insomnia is back. Great. What can I do to get to sleep? The usual things of counting to 100 never works. If anything, it wakes me up further. Children are snickering nearby. I glare hatefully in the direction of my door. On the other side is the cabin where those brats are. They've been making noises for the past hour, whispering to each other, telling jokes and laughing. I lay on my back and close my eyes and stare at the ceiling. Get distracted. Relax. Breathe. But after an age of laying here staring into the darkness of my eyelids, I'm still laying here staring at the darkness of my eyelids. Bigfoot don't eat oars, a little boy exclaims in indignation. I've had enough. Snapping my eyes open, I sit up and put my slippers on. Then, still in tank top and shorts, I storm out of my pathetic cabin and cross the mere 6 feet to the boys' cabin. I open the door and stick my head and shoulders inside. Everyone instantly goes silent, and I see several of the boys drop back into their sleeping bags and close their eyes. Little pretenders. Shut your privileged little troll mouths. I glare around at the room. Brats. It takes all of my willpower to not drop an F-bomb in there. Still glaring, I shut the door shut and storm back to my bed. Maybe now I'll finally be able to go to sleep. I brace myself for the inevitable whispering from the brats to pick up again, but miraculously, they don't. The next thing I know, I'm on my side. It takes me a few moments to remember where I am. My cabin. It was still dark. I breathe a sigh of relief. I must have finally gotten a little sleep. Don't do that. You'll wake her. I tense. The boy's voice is coming from right next to me. They're in my cabin. Don't worry, we won't wake her, another boy replied. I just needed to make sure she wouldn't wake. See, she's fast asleep. Come on, let's get to work. I close my eyes. Whatever prank they're about to do is going to be nasty, but I don't want to stop them before they start. No, now I'm angry and I want to know exactly how much these obnoxious brats deserve to get punished. On her shoulder first, just in case. What are they going to do my shoulder? I feel little kid fingers on my shoulder, then something crawling down my arm. It's small, some kind of insect. Ugh. Now I have some sort of insect crawling on me. I am tempted to wake up to brush it off, but I don't. Dropping insects on me isn't as bad as what I thought they were going to do. I had pictured something like spreading honey on my feet, cutting my hair, maybe even dragging my mattress out to the lake, which really would have gotten them in trouble. Another. A few more small insects get placed on my shoulder. Put some in her hair. No way. I wasn't allowing an insect to go in my hair. I give a soft moan and, with my eyes still closed, tightened my pillow around my head, protecting most of it. Both boys are silent. One of them is breathing nervously. Okay, close call, says one of them after a few moments pass. No hair. We'd have to move her hands holding the pillow, and I think that would wake her. Here, better idea, better. The fingertips of one of the boys runs down the edge of my right tank top strap. Next thing I know, at least 2 insects are walking in that area. Hey, what's that letter written on the tank top over the front of her chest? I think it's anarchy or Antifa or something. You know, kind of makes sense with the way she insults us. I was unpopular with a bunch of the kids because I was always tone policing their jokes, but some of the kids appreciated me for that. I open my eyes. The first thing I see is the dimpled, freckled face of one of the boys, just a foot away from mine. He's the one sticking the insects down the front of my tank top. The mischievous smirk on his face is replaced with a look of fear as our eyes meet. Get the fuck off me. I shove him backwards and sit up. Ah! The boys scream. I stand and begin brushing the ants off my arms. We're sorry. The boy who I hadn't shoved sounds like he's on the verge of tears, while the one I shoved is just standing there, pale with his mouth hanging open. You two are in so much trouble, I growl, but then a searing pain goes through my arm. GAA. I grab at the spot on my arm where I felt the pain, and then I feel it in my chest, even worse. Ooh. It's so painful that I give out an involuntary grunt of pain, and then my entire chest area is feeling the same biting sensation again and again. Ooh. Help. The ants are biting me. I pull an ant from my shoulder and toss it on the ground. Wincing through the pain and tears, I reach into my tank top and pull a long stick covered in honey and fire ants from between my breasts. I distort my face in disgust and throw the stick to the ground. Both boys are laughing. One of them, the one I shoved, is recording with his camera. Fire ants rock, he shouts. He blows a raspberry in my face, then shouts, "Come on, let's go." They run out of the cabin. You brats are so fucking dead. I put on my slippers and run after them, but they've already hidden. A large bug jumps on my shoulder. Gross. I shout, swatting it off. And that's when I see it. A red balloon with blue lines going through it, shining brightly. It hovers at the edge of the camp. The balloon begins to move away. It's going over some bushes. Now it's going back into the trees. Not so fast. I walk after it briskly. As I approach, I notice the red lines seem to be moving on their own inside the balloon. For some reason, they remind me of a heartbeat or a fetus. As I approach, it begins to float away faster. I increase my speed until I'm jogging. You're not going anywhere, bitch. I shout out, ducking around a tree branch and ducking under another as I struggle to keep the balloon in my line of sight. It's floating fast, only a little faster than I am running. I increase my speed, cursing as some sharp fur braces my bare leg. I can't let this balloon escape. Yo! I call out. What the fuck are you, anyway? It quickened its speed. Cursing, I grit my teeth and have to slow to avoid getting tangles in a bunch of burr plants. Something darted off to the side, probably a deer. The balloon vanished behind a thick cluster of dead trees. There are no leaves in them. I should be able to notice if the balloon was glowing on the other side. But it isn't. Wondering if it popped itself against a branch, I make my way to the dead trees and make my way through them. It is like I stepped into another world. It is still night, and there are trees behind me, but that's all that remains the same. There are no trees in front of me, only a wide plain of tall grass and a brightly lit carnival of tints stretching far as I can see. What the hell? I stare, mouth hanging open. There is not a single person in sight, but all the tints are lit. A Ferris wheel towers over all the tints. Tracks, probably for a roller coaster, are suspended high above the carnival tints by metal poles. I can't help myself. I have to know what is going on. So I approach the tints, transfixed despite my apprehension. Why was there a carnival in the forest, and why did we not know about it? But as I approach, the lights go out. Shit! I swear in shock. Squinting through the darkness, I can still see the tints. They're still here. What is going on? For a moment, I consider turning around and heading back to camp. I'd wake everyone. I'd tell them to come see what I'd found, and we'd explore it together. No, not everyone. This might be dangerous. Who knows how many of these rides are even properly maintained and safe to ride? The kids would stay behind. But some of us counselors would explore and try to find out what the hell was going on. What if it's not here when you get back? What if it vanishes the moment you step away? I didn't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. But this carnival in the woods and the balloon I'd been chasing, that was right out of a horror movie. Did all of this have a logical explanation? If this was supernatural, then it must be meant only for me, at least at this moment, and if I leave, it will probably vanish and not be there when I'm back with other people. I had this strange, terrible feeling that I would never, ever find this place again if I turned around and walked away. That's stupid, I tell myself, but I'm not convinced. There is no such thing as magic. I tell myself that repeatedly until I have reassured myself. No, this place isn't magical. It's just a carnival in the woods. There is a logical explanation. As for the lights going out right when I was approaching, that's just a freaky glitch. Maybe the lights can sense movement, like the lights some published bathrooms and apartment complexes had. And since they're broken, they turned OFF instead of on like they were supposed to when a person approaches. Alright, that's one supernatural thing debunked, I say, out loud to reassure myself. I nodded. Now what about the balloon? Well, the wind was blowing. It was just blowing it away from me. And those red veins moving inside it were just light sticks. There was in fact a gentle breeze that night. It was giving me goosebumps just standing there in my tank top and shorts. BRR. I start rolling my shoulders to warm myself. But why was there a carnival out in the woods to begin with? And why hadn't we ever seen it in our years at camp? Well, second one is easy. It's new this year, I say, rolling my eyes. Duh. Wow, I'm such a freak arguing with myself. But as for why there was a carnival out here to begin with, okay, that was more than a little odd. But now I've already proven that everything else weird has a logical explanation having absolutely nothing to do with the supernatural. So, this last part of the mystery also had to have a logical explanation. But still, there might be a grain of truth to the idea that I won't find this carnival again if I go back. I'd been running for a few minutes after that balloon, and I was never a good tracker, unlike all the other counselors. I was the only one who could still get lost out here. I might not be able to lead everyone back to this place. Though surely something so big couldn't be hidden forever. It would be found eventually. I was going back. But first, I would find something inside the carnival and bring it back as proof. Something that no one would be able to accuse me of packing from home. It would be something interesting, something big, preferably, but not so big I couldn't carry it. Not sure what it would be. Maybe one of the lights or a billboard. The haunting howl of a wolf pierces through the night. It's not coming from the carnival. It's coming from the woods. Another howl answers it, and soon the silence of the night is overcome with a pack of howling wolves. Okay, that's enough to make me want to return to the safety of the cabin. I didn't want to be torn apart from wolves. But just as I'm about to turn back, one of the tints in the carnival turns on again. Huh! I exclaim. It is not one of the tints at the edge. It looks like I have to pass around 40 tints to get to it. It's pretty deep in, and it looks larger than many of the other tints. It is lit up with red and blue lights that look as if they are moving in a circle around the edge of the tint. I squint towards the tint. Hovering in the center is the balloon with the red veins. It's just hovering. Oh, I know what my little souvenir is going to. I say with a small laugh as I begin to make my way into the carnival. I passed all the dark tints, barely hearing a noise at all from any of them until at last I had arrived at the big tint. I soon realized that it was not just one balloon. Every one of the lights that had lit this tint up was a balloon. That's why it looked like they were moving in circles around the tint from the distance, because they weren't stationary lights. I stare in wonder at the balloons. None of them are attempting to escape now. Of course they're not, idiot. The first one wasn't trying to escape either. That was just the wind blowing it. I don't have a good explanation, though, for why they're behaving like how they are now. There are around 6 of them, not including the one hovering inside the open tent, and all 6 of them are moving rapidly in a circle around the tent. Must be some magnetic field, I mutter, though I don't really know much about magnets. I approach the circle of balloons, and they float up lightning fast to hover high in the air where I can't reach them. They continue to circle the tent, illuminating the ground below and flashing neon reds and blues. Only one balloon is left, the one hovering still inside the entryway of the tent. Its blue veins pulsated. I approach it carefully. I'm planning to grab it. It's not going to escape me. I will pop it as soon as I grab it. A voice booms loudly over speakers. Ladies and gentlethings. Gah. I whirl towards where the sound is coming from. It's coming from 2 speakers hanging on the ceiling of the tent. I present to you the big titty gothic bitch. The balloon zooms into the tent and flies to the ceiling. It illuminates the entire inside, and I see the big titty gothic bitch the loudspeaker was referring to. There is a life-sized, hyper-realistic cardboard cutout of a teenage gothic girl. She was thin and beautiful. All her clothing was black. Her petticoat stops just short of her knees and was frilly with lots of lace. She wore black stockings that went all the way up her legs, vanishing into the petticoat. Her heart face shaped is unnaturally pale because of makeup. She has almond-shaped eyes with a slight tilt, and her nose is small. Her eyebrows are thin and well-plucked, and she has a pair of thick, pouty lips. I know what I'm going to bring back to camp. Big titty gothic bitch. The annoying voice shouts again. Who's there? I shout, turning my head all directions to see who is talking. But I can see no one. Just a recording. I triggered it when I walked in. I mutter. I turn my attention back to the gothic cutout. Her boobs aren't so big. I exclaim. They look perfectly normal to me. If you kill the bitch, you get a price. Shouts the voice again. I then notice the tray of darts resting on a counter separating me from the cutout. Ah, so it's one of those games. Piece of cake. I'll puncture you, and then I'll take you back. Maybe I would be able to puncture the balloon too. I am surprised at how sharp the darts are. I could easily cut myself on them if I wasn't careful. I aim. You want to see a real big titty bitch? I say to the cardboard. You're looking right at her, and she's not goth. Have some, bitch. I throw the dart. It hits her in the forehead. Blood squirts out. It quickly trickles down her forehead. What the fuck? How did they get fake blood? Probably paint of food coloring inside a cardboard cutout. It probably had little bags of liquid on the other side that I couldn't see from behind the counter. Smirking, I pick up another dart. But I pause. The expression on the cardboard cutout has changed. While before she was pouting, and she had a cat-like neutral expression on her face, accentuated by her thin eyebrows and eyes, now her face looks concerned. Her eyes look waterier than before, and her mouth is open in horror. Wait, how did they do that? I suddenly feel a little afraid. What happens if I throw another? I muse to myself. Out of morbid curiosity, I pick up another dart. I throw it at her right eye. Pop. A sickening pop is accompanied by blood squirting from her eye. The cardboard girl's expression changes again. Now her remaining eye is bulging wide in terror, and her mouth open like a scream. This is sick, but I'm mesmerized. I have to keep throwing, and so I do. I throw another, but staring into her horrified expression distracts me, and this time it only grazes her right shoulder. Her expression doesn't change much, but blood squirts from her shoulder. How about your titties then? I mutter. That was the name of the game. After all, last one, I promise myself, but I have to see what happens. I look into the horrified eyes of the cardboard girl, and I hesitate. She is horrified and in pain, and her eye look pleading, like she's begging for mercy. And that blood, it's so real. I've half blinded her. Her right eye is gone forever.
No.
I snap, shaking my head to clear it. She's not real. She's just a cardboard. This is just a very realistic, very sick, awesome toy. I stare back into her horrified, pleading eye, and I throw the dart at her chest, right where her heart is. Skewer. The voice booms over the microphones. The bitch is dead. Blood is flying everywhere. It gushes out of the cardboard's chest like a waterfall, only it doesn't stop. It flows and it flows. More blood than any person could ever have. Intestines are coming out, long wiggly worm-like things. Body organs are spilling out of her stomach, and the piercing cry of a girl echoes through the air. The cardboard girl is screaming, screaming without moving her lips. She topples to the ground behind her, only she's floating, for the blood is so high that it is flooding the entire chamber, and the scream is getting louder and louder and louder. I scream, "What the hell?" I turn and run as fast as I can out of the tent. All of my self-assurances that there is nothing to worry about, that there is nothing supernatural are gone. I run, arms pumping back and forth, running faster than I've ever run in my life before. I have to get back to camp. I have to get out of here. Her terrified screaming is still echoing in my ears. I can still picture her, body organs spilling out as she drowns in a lake of her own blood. What the hell is this place? Something is following me. I can hear it, running through the grass, pounding on the ground behind me. And then I'm toppling to the ground. Oomph! Pain ripples through my forehead.
I'm bleeding.
I put my hand to my forehead, and I realize that horror that there is something sticking into my scalp. Then the pain gets worse, much, much worse. I can't think. I bend over, screaming and clutching at my forehead. No, not like this. Please, not like this. Struggling just to breathe. I reach up towards my forehead with both hands and try to pull it out. Ah! I shriek as it comes out. blinking through tears and blood. I see I'm holding one of the darts from the tent. There is only one other thing I see before I am blinded. A humanoid shape approaching, eyes glowing yellow. It is holding a box of darts. I throw myself at the shape, planning to knock it down and wrestle the darts away. The shape drops the box and opens its arms wide. A balloon floats above its head, illuminating every detail. I scream, but it is too late to stop my tackle. My mind shudders even now as I look back at that thing and try to describe it. I refuse to describe it. Just know that it was humanoid, and it the worst thing you could ever see. I ran away after that, and soon I was back at camp. Nobody believed me, of course. They all went to look, but no fare was ever found. I was fired for yelling at the two boys, and I can still remember them blowing raspberries at me the next day as I got into my energy-efficient truck to drive away. But my mind was still thinking of the fair in the woods, and I wondered what dark things were happening there. I determined to come back to investigate, but so far I have not mustered the courage. Third story, The Thing in the Woods. I've been dying to tell this story, though I know no one is bound to believe me. I don't even want to tell my parents in fear that they'll stare at me in disbelief and think that I'm crazy. So, here I am, anonymously telling it to a group of strangers in hopes that someone will believe me and give me some peace of mind. It started out a few months ago when we moved into our new home. I grew up in a rural community, but there were plenty of neighbors and mostly fields around, no woods. Given that I am the youngest child, my parent waited until I was done with high school to move, as to not affect my already established life. Although we had always lived in a small, rural community, my parents were ready for something a little more secluded, something with a lot of acreage, woods, and a place to shoot. They put my childhood home up on the market and soon found their dream home, which is where I am currently and desperately writing this story. The house and the property are beautiful. It's a large, turn-of-the-century house facing 15 acres of land, the majority of which are woods and a nice half-acre pond. The best part, or so I thought, is that there are no neighbors within a mile of us. At first I really enjoyed it. Being out in the woods was very much a cathartic experience for me. It helped shed the stresses of school and studying. Being among the tall trees and the surrounding nature made all of my problems seem totally insignificant, so I made a habit of going on regular walks through the woods. As the weeks went on, I started noticing strange things as I went on my walks. I would find partially eaten deer scattered along the leaf-littered ground, accompanied by a putrid, rotting smell, which I attributed to the carcass in front of me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was probably coyotes, I would tell myself. Other than that, I thought nothing of it, but starting carrying a gun with me on my walks in case I encountered the animal that was responsible for the carnage I saw in front of me. As the days went on, I started noticing more and more mutilated deer scattered across the floor of the woods, still accompanied by the rotting smell, which I again attributed to the animals. If the increasing number of mutilations weren't enough, I started to notice a change in the sounds coming out of the woods. What was once a cacophony of sounds was now mostly dead silence, minus the low, guttural growl that seemed to be becoming more prevalent, more pronounced, and more insidious each day. By this point, I had stopped going on my little walks. Gun or no gun, I didn't want to risk the chances of facing whatever was causing these events. That being said, my curiosity eventually got the best of me one night as I heard its growls. I decided that I was going to go get a trail cam and set it up out in the woods the following day, in hopes of finally seeing what was out there. The next evening, after work, I gathered up what little courage I had left and, camera in hand, went walking out into the very woods I had promised myself I would stay out of. I never did get to set up the trail cam. I lost it somewhere in the woods while I was in a panic, running for my life. I made it about 100 yards past the tree lines into the woods, where I decided to stop and set up the camera. I thought it was a good place to set it up, and quite frankly, I was too scared to go any further. After all, I wanted to spend as little time out there as possible given the ongoing events, and the fact that it would be dark soon didn't help. Already on edge, every creak of the wood and every crunch in the leaves sent me into a panic. Rushing to set the camera up, I drop it, sending it to the leaf-ridden ground with a thud. Murmuring under my breath, cursing myself for being out there, I bent down to pick the camera up when I started to smell that putrid smell of rotting flesh again. I carefully looked around, checking my surroundings to see if anything was out there. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see anything. Just as I was finishing picking my supplies off of the ground, I heard that low, guttural growl again, as well as the snap of a branch to my right. I quickly turned, seeing a human-like creature standing there, staring at me. I was completely frozen with fear. It had human features, standing on two legs, and it had feet and hands. The two things that threw me off, however, was the fact that its skin was charred black, as if it had been burnt in a fire, and, most disturbingly, it had no upper or lower lips. Although mostly bald, a few thin, straggling hairs stuck every which way out of its scalp. Its sharp teeth were hanging out like hypodermic needles. With the absence of lips, its raw, red gums hung out in the open. Thick strings of what appeared to be saliva dripped off of its chin in a persistent stream. For one single, brief moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I quickly went through options on what to do. There were really only two viable options. Either stay exactly how I was and get attacked and most likely killed by this thing, or I could get the fuck out of there. I chose the latter. I quickly scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, throwing my camera, in vain, at the creature behind me. In the chaos of what had just occurred, I found myself to be momentarily lost after running in what I thought was the right direction for what felt like 20 minutes, but I'm sure was only 30 seconds. Looking around and not seeing the spawn of hell that I had just encountered, I stopped to collect myself and try to find the way back to the house. I finally decided on the general direction in which I should head, when I heard a commotion that almost sounded like a horse pounding its hooves on the dirt. I looked behind me and saw that thing, whatever it was, running at me on all fours, mucus-like spit flying out of the corners of its mouth, like a rabid dog. I ran as quickly as I possibly could without daring to look behind me. Although I would not look at it, I could hear it galloping behind me and smell its rotted flesh. Tears ran down my eyes, as I thought that there was no way possible to make it out of the woods alive, when I finally saw the lights of my house out of the clearing. Using what little adrenaline I had left to sprint the 200 yards or so to my back porch, I quickly opened the door and slammed it shut, not daring to look out the window. It's been about a month now since that happened. I haven't told anyone, and I will not dare to go back out in those woods. I've been doing a lot of research to see if I could find any clues as to what that thing might have been. I've exhausted myself, but I think I may have come to a conclusion. The closest thing I could find was possibly a skinwalker. I know my sighting doesn't entirely match up with the stories I've heard, but it's the closest thing I've found. Any suggestions on what it might be would be greatly appreciated. Fourth story, The Lady in the Woods. This is another story that takes place up north in Michigan, but it happened to my dad. At least, he swears it did. My dad and his buddy were staying a weekend up at the cabin, and they were having a fire near the front of the driveway by the smaller cabin. They were drinking beers and telling stories, catching up and whatnot. All of a sudden, Out of nowhere, in between the crackling of the fire and his buddy telling a story, they heard a woman cry out, "Help me!" Thinking they were just really buzzed, they paid it no mind and continued their conversation. Then it happened again. "Help me, please help me." My dad and his friend looked at each other shocked. "I definitely heard it that time, dude. What do we do?" My dad reached for the flashlight and clicked it on. "Help me, please." The woman cried again. My dad shined the flashlight around the woods, trying to locate the woman. "If you can see us, come towards the light. Come towards us." My dad and his buddy shouted as the flashlight lit up the small patch of woods and cast dancing shadows everywhere. Then all of a sudden, there she is. This skinny, frail-looking woman stumbled out from the shadows. She was covered in blood and her hair was matted. Her dress has been sliced apart. My dad got a sinking feeling in his stomach. "Oh my God, are you okay? What happened? How can we help?" This was before cell phones, so there was no way to phone the police. The woman collapsed and my father and his buddy hoisted her up around their shoulders, leading her to a bench where she could sit down. She was sobbing uncontrollably as they draped a blanket over her and did the best they could to tend to her wounds. When she was able to gain her composure, she told my dad and his friend the story. Apparently, she was with her boyfriend out in a car in the woods, and he wanted to do things she wasn't ready for. She rejected him, but he tried to force himself on her. He beat her up, slashed her dress, then kicked her out of the car before peeling off. She then started wandering the woods looking for help before stumbling across my dad and his buddy. They cleaned her up a little more and let her crash in the cabin for the night. In the morning, they took her home. She gave them both a hug and kiss on the cheek before disappearing inside. A few days later, they went back to the house to check on the lady from the woods, but her mother answered the door. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked. Yes, ma'am, we dropped off a woman here a few days ago and she was in rough shape. We were just checking in on her." "Oh, you mean my daughter?" "I think so. Can we see a picture?" Her mother went back inside the house and came back with a picture of her daughter. When my dad and his buddy confirmed it was her, the mother gave a little laugh. "Boys, my daughter has been dead for 10 years. If you did see her, it's because it was the anniversary of her death." My dad stood there stunned. "I appreciate yous coming by though. It's nice to know she's still around." Her mother chuckled as she shut the door, leaving them speechless. They turned around and headed back to the car. My dad always says that wasn't the scary part. What still baffles him and his friend to this day is when they looked back at the house before pulling the car door open, only to be met with a vacant lot with a "for sale" sign. Fifth story. Why my father went into the woods. My father was a careful man, meticulous even. He lived a life that was well measured, and if some considered him bland or dull, he didn't seem to mind. He was moderately successful in his business. He was moderately well thought of by the community we lived in. When my mother went missing, he was, to anyone that might observe him or inquire, moderately worried and sad. He was the same with me. Reasonable, patient, and generally kind in the unfocused way you might expect from a pleasant doctor or taxi driver. A detached civility and courtesy that had more to do with how my father was than how he felt about me. Not that I complained. Even when I was younger, I had enough sense to know so many kids had it worse. When my mother was around, they got along well enough, though he seemed to feed her the same brand of love as me, a bland, almost flavorless thing with an artificial aftertaste. I was 12 when she disappeared, and as much as I missed her, I was somewhat preoccupied by what would come next, because I had known for some months that occasionally, just every few weeks or so, my father would go out into the woods. It never occurred to me to follow him or to even question internally why I didn't consider doing so. My fear of my father was like background radiation, invisible but ever present since I was old enough to understand that something was wrong, eating and mutating me slowly enough that I never stopped to wonder if everyone lived so tight with tension and foreboding, perpetually waiting for the other shoe to drop. When I saw him going into the woods one winter afternoon, I wondered if the time had finally come. He never went into those woods. He wasn't the outdoorsy type, as he was quick to point out as he pulled his lips away from dry, polished teeth and nod in that precisely affable manner that he had, a mannequin making the motions of a real man. He was just home from work, but an hour earlier than usual, which was odd in and of itself. When he parked and turned toward the trees instead of the house, I couldn't help but watch from my upstairs window, heart beating a little faster as a voice whispered to me that this was it. This was it. He was starting to unravel, and now we were going to see the thing that lay behind those placid smiles and cool pats on the back. The thing that made Mom flinch when she heard the door open at night and made me stay in my room when I was home alone with him. I was terrified, but also relieved, because at least it would be over. Except it wasn't. He went deeper into the woods until I couldn't see him, and after an hour I gave up watching. When he came inside later that night, we didn't comment on his lateness, and neither did he. I went to bed half expecting to wake up to screaming, or not at all. But no, everything was fine. It was the same, except that occasionally, just every few weeks or so, my father would go back out into the dark that lay between the trees. That continued until my mother vanished, and after a period of disruption where people searched and questions were asked, our lives went back to a form of normal. The dread I felt was constant now, but it was also an old and familiar friend by that point. I escaped to school or friends' houses when I could, and TV and books when I couldn't. For his part, my father left me alone past the threshold attention and affection he felt he needed to show. His trips into the woods continued as long as I lived there. As soon as I graduated high school, I moved out and across the state to college. I went home that first Thanksgiving and Christmas, but after that, I never went back. He didn't mind. He'd call to check on me once a month, always the first day of the month at 8 o'clock, and other than that, we never spoke or saw each other again. I went back home to see to his funeral and put his affairs in order, but nearly everything had already been done for me. He died in the backyard of a sudden embolism, but you'd think he'd known the moment he was going to go. Every corner of his life had been tucked and folded, lines even and corners crisp, much like the envelope he had left for me. It wasn't some heartfelt message of love or loss, and it wasn't a confession of some dark, secret life. It was just a single line, written in my father's small, neat script. It begins with the dreams. I rented a hotel room for the 2 weeks I planned to be back in town. The house just wasn't an option. I couldn't stay in that place again. Just walking in felt like putting my foot into quicksand, and I could feel the hands of that past me reaching up and grasping at me, hungry to pull me back down. So I slept in a hotel room that could have been like any other hotel room in any city in the world, somewhere far away. And for the first couple of nights, it worked. Then I started dreaming of the woods. I'd toyed with the idea of going into the woods since I'd gotten the call of my father's death. It had been years since I'd gone deeper in than the edge of the yard. I already spent most of my playtime away from home, and after I saw my father go there, it wasn't even a consideration. That was his place now, and whatever he did there, I didn't want to know about it. Maybe I would have just chalked up my dreams of picking my way between those dark and tangled trees as residual trauma dredged up by stirring the muck of my childhood. But on the fourth day, the day after the first of the dreams, the estate lawyer gave me the envelope with my father's last words. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I headed away from town and back toward the house. I was a grown man and I wasn't wasting another day being afraid of letting that strange man poison my life. My heart still hammered as I stepped into the woods, but I was determined. I could see the ghost of a trail ahead of me, and I followed it further and further, past a small creek and across a field to a deeper part of the wood that was thicker and swampier. The mud sucked at my shoes as I went, and the air was more humid, but also deathly still. I'd have expected insects, but there were none. Bird sounds or furtive motions beneath the strange plants that grew here, but everything was silent. I had the thought that I had stepped back in time, a frozen moment from some ancient swamp, oxygen-rich and teeming with unseen life. Life that was hungry and powerful, laying just beneath the black mud watching me perhaps, or suspended from the enormous boughs of the gargantuan trees that twisted overhead. The nightmare king of some dead dinosaur's forgotten memory, but somehow alive and ready to be remembered. I blinked and looked around. Where was I? What was I thinking about? My eyes fixed on the muddy bank I was standing in front of. In the middle of it, as though it had been excavated like a fossil, was the thing I felt sure my dream and my father had sent me to find. It was a brass fortune teller machine. I glanced around again. I had to be miles away from the house. How was that even possible? The woods weren't that big. Less than a mile and I should have hit the highway. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was too dry. My body felt desiccated and hollow, just bone and dry skin and terrible will as I walked closer to the thing half buried in the hill. It was 5 feet tall, all polished wood and brass, though the metal was tarnished and the wood had began to bleach and speckle after time in the wet and the sun. The top 3 feet were a glass cube containing the torso of a puppet woman dressed in a headscarf and gold jewelry. Her painted green eyes regarded me from beneath arched, knowing eyebrows that told of knowledge of things unseen. Above the glass, the brass arched into an arabesque roof framing a small sign of red and gold-stained glass. I couldn't read it at first, but then it lit up as a soft violin began to trill from a speaker grill below the fortune teller. I was startled, but I didn't jump or step back. I was transfixed. Looking at the red lettering of the glass, I read the words glowing there. The voice of Aradat. I did let out a small scream when the fortune teller began to move, waving metal arms over a glowing crystal ball resting in front of her. The violin picked up speed, growing louder and more insistent, the insectal trilling of some long-dead song. My skin prickled as excitement began to grow in my belly, spreading up into my heart and head, down into my groin. A small tray popped out on the front of the machine, and from it, a milky white card jutted out. I didn't hesitate in reaching out and grasping it, pulling the card free from the silky strands that held it in place with some effort. On one side, there was a strange symbol that I didn't quite recognize, as though I'd seen it in a dream. On the other, there were only 2 words. Offer yourself. I let the card flutter to the mud as I saw motion next to the machine. There was a hole beside it. Somehow I hadn't seen it before, but it was there now. Less than half the height of the fortune-telling kiosk, and thick with shadow and more strands like had trailed from the card when I took it. There was no fear or confusion. I knew what had to be done. Of course I knew. I was doing something as old as rain or the sun rising, as sacred as being born or taking a life. I knelt down and crawled toward the hole, keeping my eyes lowered as I reached it and lay down, rolling over onto my back as I scooted myself forward, pushing my head into the moist darkness beyond. Once my shoulders touched the sides, I waited, holding my breath as I began to worry that I had done something wrong. But no. A coolness came to rest against my cheek as an inner darkness within that gloom came to greet me. I began to cry as that coolness dug into my skin as a voice told me to keep my eyes closed, not to look. I couldn't see it, not even a shadowy glimpse, or I'd be lost forever. I lay in the muck, head surrounded by shadows and webs, as its icy weight settled over my face. When I left the woods, I saw a sheriff's patrol car parked behind mine. I was going to try and ignore it, but Sheriff Haverland got out and met me at my car. We had met briefly 2 days earlier when I'd run into him at the funeral home, and he had seemed a jolly and affable man at the time. Now, I could see beneath that, and I knew why he was there. Everything going all right, Kenneth? Need anything for the service tomorrow? My offer to give you an escort from the church still stands. I nodded. I appreciate it. I don't think many people will be at the funeral, so traffic shouldn't be a problem. Raising an eyebrow, I studied him. Is that why you came? To offer help at the funeral again? He shrugged and gave me a small smile. Partly, yeah. That and well, I just thought I should warn you. I felt my jaw tightening. Warn me of what? The sheriff puffed out a breath as he looked down the road. Your dad, well, he's your daddy and he's passed, and I don't make a habit of talking bad about the dead. But he met my eyes again. He was a strange man, and I'd be lying if I said me and others around here didn't wonder if he was up to more than he let on. I frowned. Up to what, exactly? You talking about my mom? You never found any sign he did something to her, did you? Or that she had done anything but abandon us? Shrugging again, he nodded. No, you're right. But it was still odd. No one that knew her expected her to leave like that, and we never saw any sign of how or where she could have run off to. It's natural to suspect foul play involving the husband in something like that, you understand? He pulled at his bottom lip thoughtfully. But it wasn't just that. These last 20 years, we've had people go missing. That always happens sometimes. People move, run away, or get themselves killed. But since I was a deputy, we've had 3 times the number of people go missing here than in any of the surrounding areas. I know because I've checked. I stared at him. Okay, so what are you saying? Do you think my father had something to do with any of that? Haverland let out a short laugh. Nah, I'm not saying that. Though I admit I did wonder a few times over the years. He always gave me an odd feeling. Your dad. Nice enough fella, but I could never tell what he was really thinking. His smile fell away. You look like him, you know. I didn't see it the other day, but I do now. I glanced past him to the swaying green of the woods. I appreciate the sentiment and the offer of help, but I really do have a lot to do today. Was there more that you needed to tell me? When I looked back at the man, his face was troubled. Just, if you find anything going through your dad's stuff, things that don't belong or don't make sense, something that might belong to someone missing or, well, I don't know. Anything that feels wrong. He swallowed. If you find anything like that, let me know, yeah? I gave him smile, not too friendly or happy, but not too cool or hard, as I nodded. Sure thing, Sheriff. I'll be sure to do that. Seemingly satisfied, he stepped back from my car. Well, I'll let you get back to it. I know you want to get done and back to your life. Living in Colorado, right? I paused in opening the car door to glance back at him. I did, yes. But I'm going to be staying here now. Haverland raised his eyebrows. Really? I got the idea the other day you were hot to be done and on your way. What changed your mind? I studied him a moment. You know how it is. The past is a powerful thing. I guess I just realized where I am. A distant wind kicked up behind the man, rustling the trees and pushing him hard enough to make him have to catch his hat. Fumbling with it awkwardly, he looked back at me. Where's that? I sucked in a deep breath. The air smelled rich and thick with a dozen different scents. I smiled slightly at the fear I smelled coming from him. Home,